Well, welcome back, everyone. This is the season finale of Bundle of Hers. My name's Alizah, and we have two other amazing hosts with us today. I will offer them the pleasure of introducing themselves.
Hi, I'm Laurel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ha.
All right. Well, I want to welcome our listeners back, and I want to kind of introduce the theme of this episode as it is our finale. We started the season asking about what it means to explore who we are, and today we're looking back at where that journey took us and how it shaped the way we see ourselves now. And as a disclaimer, all of the views and opinions and thoughts we share are totally our own and are not reflective of our universities or institutions that we work at or study at. And I'm interested to know what this theme has meant to you guys personally throughout the show and throughout the season.
I like the parallel of exploration and discovery because I think that both of them are, I guess you can say they're opposite sides.
Two sides of the same coin.
Two sides of the same coin. Thank you, Laurel. They're two sides of the same coin. And I find that even as I'm exploring and discovering, I'm still actually building and creating new questions to discover and new things to explore. And it's also something that I resonate quite a lot with now and feel really deeply, because when you get into more and more of the thick of residency, it's really hard to have that moment of reflection to be able to consider and think about, how am I exploring? How am I discovering? How am I continuing to grow? And so this theme has been very helpful of giving me that reflection point and that point of reframing and thinking about. How have you felt about the theme, Laurel?
I think that I similarly have thought about it in a kind of mirrored approach, two sides of the coin. But for me, it's been a reflection of both the internal and external exploration and discovery, which is something maybe that I didn't anticipate. Where when we started this season, I was thinking about exploration and discovery in the context of, I'm trying new hobbies. I am, exploring new aspects of my research. I'm becoming a senior grad student. And what does that look like? And while I have done those things and it's been really rewarding and fulfilling, something that has been really special, I think, has been, I've also been doing a lot of internal discovery and exploration, not just what am I doing, but who am I and what am I trying to be and become? And that's been something that I've realized isn't sort of a either or, but kind of both necessarily happen in the same moment, in the same effort. And so it's been really neat to kind of, as I'm, figuring out the world around me, necessarily the world is pushing back on me and I'm figuring out myself as well. And so that's been, I think, a sort of unexpected but really lovely journey to have gone on, or to still be on, really.
Mm-hmm. I really love that. That's so beautifully stated, Laurel. Just have to say that. So wise.
Alizah, what about you?
Yeah, I originally started this season with this really, I don't know how to put it, but very ambitious, I will say. I'm yeah, we're going to discover and we're going to discover everything and I'm going to lead the charge. And in a very rhetorical device kind of way, if this past year was a book, it definitely took an ironic take in the sense of talk is cheap. And I won't say unwillingly, but I had to do an immense amount of self-discovery and self-work. And so really that threw me away from school, threw me away from any extracurriculars. And I really took this head on, but in a totally different direction. It's interesting to see the way that things have played out and how things have gone, for sure. I'm interested to know what parts of this season has kind of stood out to you. And
I think that for me, I feel like I'm probably not going to be the only person with this takeaway. Or, I mean, there's tons of takeaways from the season, right? You have people talking about all manner of things with tons of experience. And so you could do a podcast episode on each podcast episode. But what really, really resonated with me, and probably I would guess with others as well, was Lily's episode with Kate Tyler, The Grief, Life on Both Sides of the Stethoscope, which is also, I think, just a beautiful and even succinct title, where I entered into sort of the discovery and exploration with this idea that like, okay, there is a professional me that has been in grad school for a million years. And now I'm in this pocket of where I'm a senior grad student and my project is evolving, where I can sort of figure myself out and, you know, do the personal side of things. And I think that was a really beautiful episode as a reminder that like we're never going to only exist in one side of our profession or our experience, you know, like you're never going to be just a physician who sees patients. Like you are also going to be a person who at some point is a patient, sees physicians. And similarly, I view myself as a researcher a lot, you know, a grad student, a scientist, et cetera, et cetera. And the past few months especially have had to very acutely think about myself as a trans person who is researched and who benefits from certain avenues of research. And so I think the reminder that you are never only on one side, I think, of the interaction. And I think that in some ways that's important and maybe the most important thing, right? As we like connect in this sort of career of healers, to remember that it's not like a me to you, it's an us, I guess. And I feel like that episode was a really striking conversation and also reminder, if that makes any sense.
I feel like what you like just described really like resonates with me, particularly thinking about the we and the us and like not really having like delineated clear lines between what we are and understanding our identity. And I think one of the things that like I really think the vibes of listening to the season is just feeling like it's not just me. I'm really like within an us, and I'm like listening to like people beyond me and beyond what's in my headspace. Because the problem with, for me, like my experience with residency is as we're exploring and as we're discovering, we often also lose a lot of ourselves. And I'm still like in a process of trying to refine myself right now after surprising things that I didn't anticipate happened over the last few months that have had forced me to really, really rethink about what are my priorities in life? What am I doing? Why am I engaging in like an institution or like a system that causes so much harm? And like, why am I devoting all of my time to A when there's all of this stuff happening outside of the world? And like, I should be devoting my time to X, Y, and Z. And as I've been like essentially like rethinking and everything, what I really appreciate is just listening to like other voices and other perspectives, especially because you all are like been within this very traumatic, hurtful system. So it sometimes brings me like a little bit of joy to see the fire and the thought that still exists out there, because I like sometimes like rethink about old episodes I used to do in bundles, because I've been here like since the start of third year of med school to now like almost hitting the third year of residency. And I like sometimes go like, I lost so much of my fire because I've just been kind of like worked 80 hours a week, worked out of having fire. And so what I really like appreciate is like when I listen to the episodes again, like I learn new things, I see new perspectives, and I see like there is a community and there is more out there than what the system is feeding to tell me that I need to be or that I need to become.
I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like there's a lot of like mistrust and a stark change, maybe. I'm not sure about these recent years or months. Like, what have you discovered about the system throughout the season?
I think that I've always had like a level of uncertainty about a system. I like have always had a little bit of hesitation about these systems and about what we're getting to. And I think you can have that innate awareness of it, but you don't really feel it until you're in it. Mm-hmm. You also have to sometimes like sit and weigh in like, do I choose to do this activist work, or do I choose to like just rot, as Lily likes to say, like rot in my couch and not do anything? And I feel like as a chronic person with issues with saying no and like boundaries, I've still been able throughout my life to like make it work and still feel like I had a touch and point with myself. But now like it's really starting to go like you have to weigh risks and benefits. And I think the system really is built because it works you so hard. It's like hard for you to organize. It's hard for you to really like think about things. And sometimes you're just in survival mode. And it's all stuff that I was very innately aware of before residency. But I think that now that you've gone through it, you start feeling it. I think my residency is not the worst out there. And I think that my residency has really good points that they try to do to support their residents. But when you like start looking at like your schedule and you start realizing that even if there's people of good intent, the whole goal of a lot of these systems is to like just make money, and you are like the hospital staff, like a lot of times decisions that are made about like what scheduling looks like is just like who's going to cover the hospital, and residents are some of the cheapest labor that you can get to cover the hospital staff. Also like in like this greater age, like with all of the things happening like in the world, there's also been a lot more like institutional, like not allowing people to speak up in the ways that they want to speak up anymore, and always also having to navigate that. And also when you're working like 80 hours a week quite consistently, your body starts like also not doing so well. And it's like really hard to have that balance to be able to do the things that recharge you. And in a way, you kind of have to schedule in your ability to like be like a human. So it's like all to say is like, I think this is like the burnout phase that we're reaching, right? But it's forced me to reflect a lot on how I want to build myself up again and the new boundaries that I need to create for myself.
Good news. I'm actually an expert on boundaries now because I read the book Set Boundaries, Find Peace.
Oh,
well, I'm not an
great.
expert yet because I'm only 57% of the way through the audiobook of Set Boundaries, Find Peace. But
I'm half of an expert right now.
I'm half of an expert. I'm approximately 57% of an expert. But it's something that I've been thinking a lot about. And the second part of the book has been really valuable for me, which is written by Nedra Glover Tawwab, is a guide to reclaiming yourself. And I think that that's something that was really, and I haven't done a residency, and I know that I will experience the things, or at least comparable things to what you're experiencing, have, right? Where I think that we're probably, everyone on this podcast is a person who is on this podcast because they care a lot and because they like to, give parts of themselves. And it's just been a really interesting exercise to kind of figure out I like the phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. But I think that it's hard because residency is long and designed to really, really, really empty your cup, And so I'm just sort of interjecting to say that like it is important, I think, probably for you to take care of yourself. And like I had a conversation with someone a few years back about kind of the feeling of I want to do more, but I can't really do more. And we kind of settled on this metaphor of like sometimes you're growing the roots and sometimes you're like blossoming the flowers, And I think that like it's okay if right now isn't a season where you can maybe do as much as you want. It's tricky because medicine especially is something that encourages you, like I think generally speaking, it's a trend. You go into medicine because you're like, I want to help people. And then that impulse is really tricky in a system that will make you work yourself into the dirt if you don't actively decide not to do that. But I mean, you can't like take care of others unless you yourself remain a person.
I think a theme that I've picked up between the three of us here is we're still figuring it out. There's a big question mark in a lot of areas that we're exploring, whether that be medicine or personal or which often interlap, right? Or other areas. These things are still stuff that we don't know and things that we're learning to kind of figure out. I guess I just want to add that that's been a challenge for me personally. I've learned recently that I have a very dichotomous brain in terms of like, well, if I fail this, then that means I suck at all of medical school, or that's like totally unfair and not reasonable or logical when it's said back to me. But if it's in my brain, that totally gets by. That makes sense. And I have really grappled with trying to figure out my identity in terms of, well, if I'm not good at everything, then that must mean I'm bad at everything, right? Like trying to find that nuance. And I guess I just want to say I'm really leaning into not having life figured out at the moment. And I'm curious, like, what does that look like for you guys today? For me, it's like trying to find a schedule, trying to stick to it, trying to remember to eat. What does not having it figured out look like for you guys?
I told my PI, who's, you know, the head of my research lab that I'm doing my PhD in, after my abstract meeting, that like I felt kind of disappointed at some of the feedback I got. And he asked me, he was like, well, what feedback did you want? And I had to be like, I didn't want any feedback. I wanted them to tell me it was perfect, you know? And it's something where I think I'm a person where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this 100% right the very first time. And no one is ever going to question that I care or that I am trying or that, you know, things of that nature. And it turns out that that doesn't happen and it's literally impossible. I have to just be aware, I guess, of what is important to me. And by this, like, I'll give a very silly example, which is my research right now is going really, really well. And I am also, I think, doing a reasonable job spending time with my loved ones, which is really, really important to me. Also, this week, it took me 3 days to put my clothes away in the laundry bin after I put the clean laundry in my dirty laundry bin and was like, all right, that's going to be the next thing I do. And then it definitely wasn't. That's a very, I think, silly, benign example, but I think that kind of thing happens all the time, where I think one of the most important lessons that I've made progress on, but I'm still trying to learn, is like, you don't have to juggle all of the balls at the same time. Like, you're allowed to put things down and pick them up. And I think that that's something where I am coming to terms with. Like, I gave a like a small group project update a couple weeks ago, and I was like, this slide deck is bare bones, but it has the information that y'all need. I didn't spend time putting in animations or transition, you know, like, I am trying to be more mindful of myself and my energy and my capacity, and the fact that joy and happiness and unproductive things are allowed to be my priority over this is going to be the best slide deck that anyone has ever seen. But it's something where, like, I feel like I am learning to be okay with an okay, you know, job, right?
That was like very beautifully and wonderfully stated, Laurel.
Thanks.
Yeah. I like, actually, it's like kind of in the same vein in like trying to just figure life out for me. I feel like residency has been a stage of like figuring different aspects of my life out at different times, depending on what gets triggered. And there was like a stage when like my figuring my life out was going like, hey, you gotta like lower your expectations. You have to be okay with being okay. And what I would just go in like at work when I'm walking into work, and I'd be like, your goal today is to answer all the parents' questions. That's all you need to do. Answer the parents' questions. And I like kept it such a low goal. And I felt that like actually like when I did that, it meant I went through the day without like not feeling like, oh God, I am the most terrible physician in the entire world. All of my patients hate me, and like going into that spiral that I could do. And then similarly, like now a lot of times like figuring out my life is like going like, hey, like, yeah, like I'm now like choosing a lot more time for me to sometimes just read a book and not care about that email that I need to send, because that email will eventually get sent. Maybe it's not at the timeline that I want it to be, but it's okay to like wait a little bit. It's all to say is that I have been learning like a lot more about trying to just like set more reasonable expectations for myself to allow for growth and to like allow for wiggle room. And it has been very, well, it's like still a work in progress. I think I did say this like some time ago, but I do fully believe that we're all works in progress and we are always like building and growing.
I love that. And I think just being okay with being okay. I think that the demographic of people who kind of land up in medicine or work incredibly hard and struggle to stay in medicine are these maybe lean towards perfectionistic tendencies. And I just don't want to understate the difficulty or the struggle it takes to kind of just breathe out and lessen those expectations for oneself. One of my dear friends that I had the opportunity of meeting up with this past week, we were talking about how we feel like we're failing at everything, We're like, I told her, I was like, I don't feel like I'm a good student. I don't feel like I'm a good daughter. I don't feel like I'm a good sister. I don't feel like I'm a good friend. And I was like, but there's one thing I can do, and that's clean baseboards. Like, I just told her, like, I can clean. And so, like, even just taking a step back to like be like, okay, I'm competent at this, which is like totally unrelated and totally maybe not productive, but I can do that. And she shared that she is like now this expert baker of bread, which I was like, that's totally more useful considering the future we're looking at. I'm like a professional baseboard cleaner. But anyways, I really, really liked what you said.
One of my favorite quotes, and first of all, I don't know if I can clean baseboards. So to me, that is a very significant skill because it's a skill I don't have, right? And I want to give one quote and then one sort of like response to something you said, which is, I love this quote, which is John Steinbeck. And now that you don't have to be perfect, you can be good. And I want to also add that I've been reading a lot about child development, and partially in relationship to me therapizing my own childhood and partially in relationship to my intention to kind of work in pediatric rare disease. And one of the things that I have found that I've actually found comforting as like a person, despite not being a parent, is that a lot of the conversations about, early childhood development and how sort of, spongy kids can be is this concern that people are going to be bad parents. And the research shows that you really don't need to be a perfect parent. You just have to be quote unquote good enough. And I love that, where it's like, it's not that you have to be perfect. You don't have to be great. And like, even words like good, like Alizah, like you said, like, am I a good student? I think can become really, really laden with a lot of like pressure and expectations. And so I've been really leaning into this sort of good enough, and it's something where like the perfectionist version of me, whatever, probably even a year ago, to be honest, but especially the version of me going into grad school would have like really balked at this idea that I was into the whole good enough, they're like, no, what is good enough? Like perfection. But it's something where it's like, you can't be perfect at everything. And so when I think, like, am I a perfect student? No, but like I was a good enough student and I learned the things that I needed to learn. And I don't know. I think that there's some amount of serenity in me trying to be, for the first time in my life, not a complete control freak. And it's been a nice time. And I wanted to ask, because like I'm talking about it as if this is like a switch that I flipped, and it's not at all. It's ongoing and hard. I had therapy this morning and I told my therapist the thing that has been true, which is like I've cried more probably in the last couple months than I have in like my entire life before that, right? Like there's a lot going on, but like it's worthwhile even if it's hard. And like I said, practicing vulnerability. And so I just kind of wanted to ask y'all, exploration is hard. Discovery can be hard. Not everything you find is peaches and rainbows. And so was there a time that y'all felt lost or uncertain or even resistant to kind of the process of like discovery and exploration this past season?
I actually kind of lost a lot of sense of structure, I think, in my personal life. And there was a lot of pieces of my life that were just kind of, I think, I don't want to say usurped because that's maybe not fair, but time goes on and people, I think, well, for me, in my case, passed away. And I found it very hard to even engage in an interest, right? To even say like, oh yeah, like I want to learn more, or I want to discover this. There were times where I was like, I'm okay with being numb right now. Like, and I actually don't want to experience emotions outside of this. I'll share, I also go to therapy, and during that time, and it's still a work in progress, right? I say like during that time, I'm still going through that time. I was encouraged to kind of lean into my being numb and my resistance to learn more and my resistance to not want to discover. And as we said earlier, like being okay with that. I think as like, I don't know if I'm neurotic, but I know I definitely am very black or white thinking. And I was like, well, if I'm not discovering perfectly, then I'm not discovering at all. And so I was just encouraged to be like, why don't you sit? Why don't you sit and see what comes by in this period of like not learning about yourself and not discovering or not leaning into why you have these attachments, like just sit here and be okay with that. And that was definitely challenging because I felt like I wasn't pursuing anything and I wasn't being efficacious with my time and I wasn't healing correctly. And it really was a lot of mental gymnastics. But I think like sitting in the space that you occupy is fundamental to me, and like really taking in the scenery of whatever desolate landscape you might find yourself in, And I don't know if that makes it easier or if it makes time pass faster, but I do know that it dampened the voices of like, we need to exit here immediately. We are not doing well here. Like this almost, I don't want to say capitalistic, but I'm going to capitalistic force of like, be your best self, always be in bloom. And I don't know, it was nice to have that voice kind of quieted, at least for a moment.
I'm really sorry that all of that happened. Just want to put that out there first.
Thank you.
I've like kind of alluded to it when I like did my rant spill a bit earlier. I was in my angry phase, and now like you've seen me go through the 5 stages of grief. But during the season, like earlier this year, I actually had health stuff that occurred, and it basically left me unable to do anything. I am a person who, even when I'm on vacation, I'm like running, I'm like packing my schedule, seeing people, I'm like doing all of these things, even like doing residency or like all of the millions tasks, because no boundaries, as we've established an agreement to a lot of different things. And there was just a time period where I was just stuck sitting in what I called my dark bat cave, being unable to do anything except listen to audiobooks. Like that was the only thing that I could do that didn't make me feel worse. And it was really, really hard because as a person who's like really active and who like puts a lot of my health stake, I've like over the years, I've kind of put a lot of my like personality and my identity into doing things like running, into like being really like physically active, into doing stuff and like going out and like eating food and like all of this. And suddenly I was just, everything that I like was building, like I was going like, I'm discovering, I'm building this identity, like all of that just got taken away from me for a brief period of time. It was really, really hard and I wasn't happy about it. And I was just forced to just sit there and think and like kind of like basically reclaim myself. And I think part of the reason why I'm now like so bitter going into residency is that like then I had this whole time where I could just sit and like realize like, oh my gosh, there's like all these things about me that I used to have that like I completely forgot. One of my things that I remembered was I was talking with someone I met after I started residency. I was talking about how like I love having plot bunnies and I love like dreaming up plots. I love to write. And they're like, I didn't know you were a writer. I didn't know you really like loved art and all of these things. And I was like, oh shoot, I lost this big part of my identity that people pre-residency would have like known about me, pre-med school even. Something that I realized is I think there's a point where you like work so hard that your body goes like screams and says like, you have to calm down. I have to hold you accountable to your actions. Like, please sit. And so my body did that. And it was not fun for me as someone who's always moving. But I'm like really glad I did it. It does make me now like a bit more like spicy with my work and with like what these systems and institutions expect of me. But it also means that I've been kind of doing a lot better with grappling and like dreaming of like how to build an environment for me that allows me to stay true to me.
That's really lovely, Ha. And I'm sorry that you had to experience some really destabilizing things, but I'm proud of you and I'm always amazed by you. I've been listening to a lot of Rebecca Sugar songs. Does Adventure Time in Steven Universe, and there's the song Everything Stays that you made me think of, where the chorus goes, everything stays right where you left it, everything stays, but it still changes ever so slightly, daily and nightly, in little ways when everything stays. I don't know, this idea that like you maybe lose things, including things that you love. You can pick those things up again and they'll be changed, but you'll be changed too, you know? Mm-hmm. An exercise that we had after my first year of med school that I really liked was our layers, which is like our medical humanities class, right? Our layers instructor asked us to name one thing about us that changed in the past year that we liked and one thing that changed that we didn't like. And it's something that I super appreciated because everyone, I think, always views, the progression of time as a linear thing. And it's like, oh, better and better. And it instead, I think we got to reflect of like, after a year of med school, in some ways I have grown and in other ways I have shrunk. And I think that's something that if you don't realize, then you never get to pick those things up again, So there's this video game that's my best friend's favorite video game, and I finally played it after years of them talking about it, and I'm like, dang it, why did I take so long to play it? It's called Alan Wake 2, and it has all this stuff with time loops, but you realize it's not a loop, it's a spiral. And the whole idea is even if you go through the same things, each time you're learning and you're growing and you are, I don't want to say better, but like even if you're doing the same things, you're not necessarily in the same place. And that's something where even if you encounter the same things and you find yourself falling into the same patterns, you can still take what you've learned. And I think that's something for me that like right now I'm in a very different stage of like the grad school versus med school. And I think about going back to med school and my very, very chill vibes were probably not be so chill. I was not chill the last time I was in med school, and I don't think med school is going to let me stay chill probably when I return. But like at least the things that you love will wait for you, I think.
I think all things will be for our benefit, right? Whether they're great or bad, I think it ultimately comes out in the wash where we grow from it, like Hal is saying. And so that's something I want to maybe encourage our listeners to take away, but also something that I like practically like need to get stapled to my forehead.
I love that. I think that I especially the attitude I have to a lot of things, that's actually I think something that I've evolved but kept is it'll either work out or it'll be a really funny story. And that has generally been true, where the worse something is, the more I get excited because I'm like, I'm going to tell this to the most engaged audience, about how horrifying this is. And I think while we're finishing the finale, gently closing this book chapter of this season of Bundle of Hers, maybe we can think about a lesson or feeling for folks to carry forward from this season. But also, I got a tarot reading from my sister's girlfriend this past weekend. I got the Four of Wands, which means it's a card of like celebration and like teamwork and whatnot. And so I think also maybe we can leave with what's something you're proud of from this season, this experience, something that we can celebrate together. I'll say for a lesson or feeling, I think listeners should be silly. I stand by the silliness. I feel like I've learned more and become more passionate about adults are meant to play also. And, what's good for children is probably also good for adults and humans. And I think play and creativity and, fun is something that we don't always necessarily prioritize. And I think it's super important. And I think the more I've leaned into that as a person, I feel like honestly, the better my work has become because I'm both rested, but also when I am approaching professional stuff, I'm also like, oh, I still feel creative instead of like I'm dead. And that's been nice.
I love that. I've started actually talking about playing, Laurel. I actually have started like texting friends and going like, do you all want to parallel play? So we like parallel play like children. So fun. But the lesson that I want to also like give to our dear listeners is to like keep yapping with each other and to like yap with your community. Like I honestly will admit, as you might like have felt from like the tone of my voice, but I started this episode really tired. But now I've ended this episode feeling like my heart has grown 2 sizes bigger, like the Grinch. And so all to say is I think a lot of times systems and things like make it, you can feel like so alone, but please yap on and yap with the people that you love so that you can like continue to build community and continue to like find like peace in yourself. And sometimes yapping can also be yapping to a journal, but just yap, 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 yap.
In addition to, I think, the yap and the silly and the play that you guys brought up, I think one lesson I think I want to offer to our listeners is integration. I think in the spaces that you show up, that you yap with your friends or you parallel play or you have a fun, silly, good time, I want people to bring all parts of them. Bring your joy, bring your fear, bring your grief, and bring your wonder. Bring it here, and I want it all. I want you entirely. I want you comprehensively. And don't be afraid to show up as you are, right? Like, you don't need to have it all together. And I want the messy along with the clean, and I want the Bradford pear trees along with the roses. I just think that's so valuable in those interactions where we yap and play with each other.
I really, really resonate with that. And to be honest, I think probably that's something that I am really, if we're talking about like little things to celebrate, I feel like one of my celebrations is I've been, I think, more myself, like literally more myself, instead of being only convenient or accommodating or pleasant. I have, I think, leaned on the people around me more and both shared on Bundle of Hers, but also like let my friends see the parts of me that are, I don't know, again, scared or neurotic. And I think that I'm proud of myself for like letting people love me as their friend, as their intimate, and all the weirdness that brings, instead of having people only see the sort of me at my best or me at my most like articulated, because I feel like I have gotten more, I think, intimacy even in like a few months of really sharing deeply than I think that you get from almost like years of only letting people see your highlight reel. And that's something where like I don't think I realized how you said at the beginning, like how often we exist within an us or a we, maybe without even realizing it. And I'm really grateful for that experience and excited to continue it.
Something that I'm happy about this year is it's been my year of like going to concerts and like checking out a lot of pastry shops. I got to see J-Hope recently in Oakland, which is like 1/7 of BTS, which is like big because I don't think I'm ever going to be able to secure a BTS ticket. So at least I got to see 1/7 of them. So I'm like stoked. I like that I'm still like living my like best life, not letting becoming an outer and entering my 30s stop me from having a good time. So that's what I'm proud about myself. What about you, Alizah?
Something that I guess I want to celebrate is tackling things, I guess, that I kind of have put off in the sense of like, I needed, I think, this disruption in my timeline of my linear growth that I had planned for me perfectly to tackle things that I didn't want to bring to the surface because it wasn't part of my highlight reel. But now that I've had the space and had the time to really delve into those things, I'm proud of myself for like looking at them critically and analyzing it and seeing, where I fell short or where I've succeeded. And I'm grateful for the growth that I've done, even though it may not show up on a CV or a resume, but I just know that I'm a better person now than I was, or I guess more of myself than I was a year ago.
Hooray! Yay! And ultimately, you're a person and not a CV. So I think that it's like a beautiful thing, even if you can't make it into a bullet point, Yeah,
I'm like, I just want to let you know, this isn't typically on a CV, but I am like the most whole person. I'm the best person of myself right now. So lucky you.
Hell yeah. That's... What a special thing, There's only one you, and then you are being the most yourself. No one else can be you, and you get to be the most you. It's awesome. And I think with that, perhaps we conclude this season of Bundle of Hers. Farewell to season 7. You can listen to this and other episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts. And farewell.
Bye, everyone.
Fade out, fade out, fade out, fade out.